You don't have to be rich to start, but you have to start to get rich with $10, with 10 minutes, with one new idea. That's how wealth begins. The secret to wealth is not in the money, it's in the mindset. Wealthy people think in terms of growth, investment, return, and legacy. Poor thinking, on the other hand, lives day to day, spends every dollar, and never questions where the time or money went. So, if you want rich results, grow rich roots. If you want the money to come, become the kind of person it would never want to leave. Not someday, today. I remember a lesson from many years ago, a lesson that shaped the way I came to understand the nature of discipline and why it separates those who build a future from those who only dream about it. It came from a quiet conversation I had with a mentor. I was struggling then, like many people do, trying to do 10 things at once and finishing none of them. He smiled and said to me, "If you want to move a mountain, you don't swing 10 shovels at 10 different spots. You pick one spot and you dig until the job is done." What he was teaching me that day was the habit of follow-through. The wealthy don't move from one idea to another every week. They pick one worthy goal, break it down, and stay with it until it is complete. If you watch the habits of successful people, you'll notice one common trait. They have learned to focus, not in some fancy or complicated way, but in a way that almost no one else is willing to practice. They pick one goal, one priority, and make it the center of their energy until it becomes a reality. They understand that the difference between thinking about a goal and achieving a goal is the bridge called follow-through, and that bridge is built one plank at a time. Most people make the mistake of setting too many goals and chasing too many ideas at once. They fill their notebooks with ambitious plans and forget that every finished endeavor started with one well-executed step. The wealthy understand that it's not the quantity of ideas that create their future, it's the quality of their follow-through. They pick one thing and give it their best until it no longer needs their hand to sustain it. It becomes an asset, a foundation upon which other victories can be built. I recall when I first learned this for myself. I was trying to grow a business while working another job. I was exhausted, distracted, and disheartened because no area of my life was gaining the momentum I longed for. Then came the shift. I chose one area, one priority, and gave it a block of dedicated time every day. I stopped starting new projects until that one was solid. At first it felt slow and frustrating, as if every step was too small. But soon those steps compounded. Suddenly the thing I had focused on started to gain strength. The income grew. The habits deepened. The results spoke for themselves. That's the secret. What you focus on grows. What you scatter disappears. The wealthy have learned to say no to the many so that they can say yes to the one thing that will move the needle in their lives. The person who finishes what they start is rare. They stand apart in a world of starters, talkers, and dreamers, and that rarity is where the reward lives. Break your goal down until it fits inside a single week. What can you accomplish in the next 7 days that will move the dial? Make it specific, make it measurable, and then protect that commitment like it's sacred, because it is. Do this for one goal, finish it. Only when it is complete, only when it no longer depends upon your daily effort, do you move to the next. Imagine planting an apple seed and then digging it up every morning to see if it's growing. You wouldn't expect a harvest from that kind of behavior. Yet this is how many people approach their life and their finances. They expect results when they have refused to stay long enough to nurture the seed until it bears fruit. The wealthy understand that mastery doesn't come from starting. It comes from finishing. And when you finish one thing, a quiet strength grows within you. You now have proof. You can point to a piece of work, a finished project, a built stream of income and say, I started, I stayed, I finished. This is how momentum is built. This is how belief is shaped. Not by saying 100 times that you will, but by doing it once and repeating that process until it becomes the very fabric of who you are. If you want to change your life, if you want to rise out of mediocrity, pick one thing. Focus until it's done. Finish it. Let it be a beacon for every goal that will come after. In a world that celebrates starting, you will stand tall as one who finishes. And one finished thing is worth a lifetime of beginnings. I learned early that you don't have to shake hands with a great person to benefit from their wisdom. You don't have to wait until a successful person is standing right in front of you to ask the questions you're burning to ask. The truth is, some of the best mentors I've ever had were people I never met, yet they shaped the direction of my life more than any conversation across the table ever could. How? Through books, through stories, through interviews and lectures. The greatest teachers often leave breadcrumbs for those hungry enough to find them. I remember being a young man with very little money and very few connections. I didn't have access to millionaires or masters of their craft. What I had was a library card and a notebook. What I had was an obsession with learning how life worked for people who had conquered their own limitations. So I read. I read about leaders, about entrepreneurs, about philosophers and inventors. And I treated those pages as if I were sitting across from them, asking questions, listening closely, making notes, as if every word could shift the trajectory of my life. That's the secret many people miss. You can have a conversation with a person across time and space simply by allowing their ideas to live in your mind. A book, an interview, a recorded speech, these aren't static things. They are the footprints of someone's thought process, someone's hard-earned wisdom, someone's victory over doubt and circumstance. And when you approach these materials with the right mindset, when you open the page with a pencil in your hand and a heart that's ready to learn, you're doing more than consuming information. You're gaining access to the very thinking that built their success. The wealthy understand this. They don't just accumulate information, they study thought patterns. They're looking for ideas that shape decisions, decisions that shape results. It doesn't matter if the person lived 100 years ago or 100 miles away. What matters is that you can adopt the best parts of their thinking and apply it to your life. You don't have to inherit their genes or walk their path precisely, but you can adopt their mindset, and that can change your direction forever. I remember when I came across the biography of a businessman who had started from nothing and built an empire that lasted generations. As I read, I felt like I was eavesdropping on a conversation between him and the world, between him and adversity. The way he spoke to himself, the questions he asked when things weren't going well, the habits he refused to compromise on, these weren't just stories. These were lessons. And when I closed that book, I felt like I had just spent a long afternoon in the company of a teacher. Not because I met him, but because I chose to listen. That's what separates the wealthy from the rest. They understand that every page you turn can save you 10 years of trial and error. Every line can be an instruction manual for a better decision, a better day, a better year. The cost of a book, an audio, a course, it's a fraction of its worth compared to the cost of ignorance. Yet most people won't pay it, not because it's too expensive, but because they don't understand its value. The wealthy do. They'll spend hours with a book, extracting ideas like a miner extracting gold from the earth. They recognize that one insight can be worth a lifetime of effort. So ask yourself, who are you allowing into your mind every day? Whose thoughts are shaping your thoughts? Whose habits are shaping your habits? You can have mentors every morning, every evening, every quiet moment you claim for yourself. You can have a conversation with the greatest minds in history if you're just willing to listen. Treat every book, every interview, every lesson as if it were a private session with a teacher you respect. If you can do that, if you can slow down long enough to truly read, truly ponder, and truly apply, you will find that the world's best ideas are no longer hidden behind gates and walls. They're available to those with a humble heart and a hungry mind. The wealthy have always known this. They don't wait for access to a room. They build their access from a page, a recording, a lesson passed down from one seeker to another. Do this long enough and one day you'll realize that you've become the person others long to learn from. And that's when you understand the true miracle of a teacher, that the greatest lessons don't come from a handshake, but from a willingness to listen. There was a time when I felt weighed down by doubt, when every new challenge felt like a mountain too tall to climb. I would stand at the base, looking up, listing every reason why I might fail. What I came to understand later is that this is how doubt operates. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't demand that you give up. It simply suggests that you wait until you feel more confident. It says, wait until you're ready, wait until you're certain. And that is its quiet trap. You don't wait for confidence, you build it. Not with words, not with thoughts, not with wishes, but with action. One morning, many years ago, I decided to test this for myself. I had a long list of things I needed to do, but one task stood out from the rest. It was the one I dreaded the most. The phone call I didn't want to make, the conversation I was putting off, the decision I was afraid would define the rest of my year. And that morning, I made a choice to do the thing I feared first. Not later, not after lunch, not when I felt prepared, but right then, as soon as I put down my cup of coffee. What happened surprised me. The moment I acted, something shifted inside. Not after I acted, but in the very act itself. Suddenly, the thing I was afraid of felt smaller. Suddenly, the weight of doubt lifted just enough for me to move to the next step and then the next. By the end of that morning, I felt like I had conquered a piece of myself. Not because I felt bold from the start, but because I acted in the presence of doubt and refused to wait for permission from my feelings. That is the secret many miss. Confidence doesn't come from repeating affirmations in the mirror. It doesn't arise from imagining victory. It is born when you do the thing you least want to do, when you move toward the discomfort you've been trying to avoid. The wealthy, the successful, the leaders you admire, they don't wait until fear disappears. They walk with it, knowing it is the price of growth. Each morning, ask yourself, what is the one thing I am resisting? What is the conversation, the decision, the step that will stretch me? Whatever it is, put it first. Do it before the rest of the world has a chance to fill your ears with distractions. Do it before the voice of doubt has a chance to raise itself to a shout. This is how character is built, not in moments of ease, but in moments of resolve. I've lived long enough to witness a simple truth. The person who chooses discomfort when it's necessary is the person life chooses to reward. The person who embraces resistance when it arrives develops a strength that doesn't wash away with the first hard rain. They don't wait for the right conditions to move. They create the right conditions by acting. I remember watching a man I deeply respected build a thriving enterprise from almost nothing. He started every morning the same way, making one call that frightened him, tackling one problem that felt too big, doing one thing that every instinct said to postpone. He called it earning the day, and it shaped the foundation of his life. What he knew, and what I came to understand later, is that a person doesn't rise in moments of comfort. They rise in moments of decision. That is why you must pick the one thing that feels hard and put it at the very top of your list every morning. Let it be your ritual, your declaration, your daily proof that you can walk through doubt and still move forward. In time, those moments accumulate. One hard call becomes 10. 10 become 100. 100 moments of action build a person unrecognizably stronger than the one who started. Trust this process. Trust that every step you take toward difficulty rewires the way you think, the way you respond, the way you carry yourself through life. Action is the bridge between doubt and belief. And when you walk it every day, you don't just achieve more, you become more. Do this long enough, and one morning you'll rise, knowing that no matter how tall the mountain, you have already trained yourself to climb. I remember a lesson I learned many years ago when a friend came to me excited about a new opportunity. He laid out the idea, spoke with enthusiasm, and waved a paper listing projections and profits. He wanted me to join him. I liked the sound of it. It promised quick returns, promised a sense of belonging to a group chasing the same dream. Yet as I listened, I felt that quiet tug inside that knowing voice that reminds you of where you're headed and where you must draw a line. I said no. Not because it was a bad opportunity for him, but because it didn't fit the path I had set for myself. What I came to understand in moments like those is that saying no is one of the highest forms of wisdom you can practice if you're serious about building a wealthy, balanced life. The world doesn't reward those who say yes to every offer or every whim. The world rewards those who understand that every no creates space for a stronger, more aligned yes down the line. The discipline of saying no is like planting a fence around a garden. You protect the soil from weeds and pests, making sure that only what you intentionally plant has room to grow. Most people never recognize this. They say yes to every dinner invitation, every shiny new gadget, every request for their time, every trend that captures their attention. They say yes until their focus is fragmented, their energy depleted, their bank account drained by 100 tiny leaks. And then they wonder why the years slip by and their big dreams remain only faint outlines in their diary. The wealthy understand this in their bones. What you say no to is just as important as what you say yes to. I can still recall the first time I refused an expensive impulse, a watch I didn't really need, a car that would have announced status to others but robbed peace from my future. The salesman smiled and spoke about how I deserved it. And I stood there for a moment, allowing myself to feel the sting of saying no, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. I walked away knowing I had said yes to something far more valuable: my freedom, my focus, and my future. That's what saying no really means. It means understanding that every dollar spent is a dollar that can no longer be invested. Every hour wasted is an hour that can no longer be claimed. Every distraction embraced is a moment pulled away from the work that could have shaped a legacy. The wealthy are no different from anyone else when it comes to temptations. They are surrounded by noise, by pressure, by the allure of quick pleasures. What separates them is that they recognize the cost and have trained themselves to walk away. This lesson doesn't just apply to money. It applies to how you spend your time, your energy, your attention. Saying no to gossip creates space for reading. Saying no to a night out creates space for rest. Saying no to another person's agenda creates space for your own. The quality of your life is shaped not by how many opportunities you accept, but by how well you guard the space between the yes and the no. I learned this the hard way when I was younger. Too often I tried to do too many things at once, hoping that activity would compensate for clarity. It didn't. It left me exhausted and unfocused, chasing too many threads that never tied into a rope strong enough to climb. The shift came when I started looking at every decision as a trade. Will this choice advance the story I want to live? Will this expense multiply later, or will it only satisfy a moment? Will this person help build my future, or just occupy my present? That is the discipline of saying no, not as an act of denial, but as an affirmation of purpose, not as deprivation, but as an investment, not as turning away from life, but as turning toward a better, richer, more aligned one. The more you practice this, the stronger it becomes. The more you practice this, the closer you draw to the person you always intended to be. In a world that begs for your attention every waking moment, saying no is how you protect the seed of your future until it grows tall enough to stand on its own. I remember standing in line one morning at a small cafe, watching people shuffle in and out, hands wrapped around paper cups, eyes half closed, starting their day with a ritual that felt as necessary as breathing. There's nothing wrong with a cup of coffee. What's wrong is when that moment becomes a symbol, a tiny example of how we spend ourselves every day. Not just money, but focus, energy, time. You don't notice it when it's $1, one moment, one decision. You only notice it when 10 years have passed, when 10 years of tiny choices have added up to a future you didn't intend. That morning, I asked myself a simple question. What if I stopped accepting the small cost of things and started accepting the small value of things? What if every time I chose between a moment of comfort and an investment in growth, I tilted slightly toward growth? Not drastically, not violently, just slightly. What if $1 became 10, 10 became 100, 100 became 1,000? What if 10 pages of a book became 10 books, 10 books became 10 ideas, 10 ideas became 10 new income streams? What if one call a day became 10 connections in 10 days, and 10 connections became 10 opportunities, and 10 opportunities became 10 outcomes? Suddenly, those tiny moments that felt insignificant became the threads that wove the entire fabric of my future. I've watched this play out countless times, both in my life and in the lives of others. The difference between a person who builds a fortress and one who doesn't is almost never found in one huge decision. It's found in 100 tiny decisions made quietly, faithfully, when no one was watching and no applause was coming. The person who skips one $3 coffee every morning doesn't notice it after a day. They notice it after 10 years, when that $3 became a down payment. The person who spends 10 quiet minutes every evening reading a page doesn't notice its worth after a week. They notice it after 10 years, when those 10 pages became 10 books a year, 10 ideas, 10 breakthroughs. The person making one phone call a day doesn't recognize the result after a month. They recognize it when 10 years later their network is their net worth. What separates those who climb from those who stay rooted in place is this simple understanding. Wealth is built in moments, not years, not decades, not once in a lifetime strokes of luck. Moments. The moment you pick up the book instead of the remote. The moment you save the dollar instead of spend it. The moment you make the call instead of scrolling the screen. These moments seem insignificant when isolated. Together, compounded across years, they create an unstoppable force. I learned this lesson the hard way when I was younger. I used to tell myself, it's just $1. It doesn't matter. And then one day I stopped and added it all up. What I discovered shook me. Hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands of dollars had quietly leaked out of my hands because I refused to acknowledge the weight of small choices. So I flipped the script. I started treating every dollar like an employee. I gave it a job. Some worked in a fund, some worked in a small investment, some worked in a book that shaped my mindset. Slowly, those tiny increments became a stream, then a river. People often ask for the secret. They expect a number, a tactic, a trend. The truth is much quieter. The secret is in making a decision every morning to honor the value of the moment. The secret is in choosing to move one step closer when no one else can witness it. The secret is accepting that a mountain is built from countless stones laid intentionally, one upon the other. You don't have to change your whole life tonight. You just have to change one moment tomorrow morning. Do that every day, and 10 years from now, when you stand where I stand, you won't wonder how it happened. You'll know. You laid those stones. You tended those seeds. You kept choosing when it was hard and when it was easy to build a life you could stand upon, a life you could call your own. I remember the first time I truly understood the idea of making money while I slept. It didn't come from a book, a seminar, or some complicated chart. It came from a quiet conversation I had with an older gentleman many years ago. He was a retired farmer, a man with weathered hands and a slow smile. I asked him how he was still making a living when he no longer worked in the fields every morning. He said something that stayed with me for the rest of my life. I don't have to be in the field anymore because I learned how to plant seeds that grow when I'm not looking. At the time, I didn't fully understand, but as I walked away, those words sank deep. Making money while you sleep is just planting seeds in a way that allows nature, in this case, value and time to work for you. Most people work hard for money. They trade hours for dollars, life for a paycheck. There's honor in hard work, and it's necessary at the beginning. But hard work alone doesn't guarantee wealth, it guarantees fatigue. True financial success is built when you shift from working for money to putting money to work for you. That shift doesn't happen because you find a secret investment or stumble upon a trend. It happens because you make an investment first in yourself and knowledge. The moment you understand how money operates, how value is exchanged, how ideas can multiply, you have stepped into the realm where money works long after you've stopped clocking in. I learned this lesson slowly. In the early years, every dollar felt like a prisoner that I had to spend for my survival. But then I started asking a different question. What can I do with $1 that turns it into a worker? What can I learn that gives this dollar a second, third, or 100th shift? At first it was a book, then it was attending a seminar. Eventually it became making a tiny investment, buying a piece of a company I believed in. The first dividend felt like magic, not because of its size, but because it represented a shift in philosophy. This dollar earned money while I was doing something else. Suddenly the path became clear. The wealthy have always understood this. They don't just save money, they give money a job. They understand that the moment you spend $1, it's gone. But the moment you invest it, it can return with friends. Not tomorrow, not necessarily next month, but over time. They also understand that before you can multiply money, you must multiply knowledge. You have to learn the rules of the game before you can win it. And this doesn't mean an expensive degree or formal training. It means a hunger for understanding, a willingness to ask questions, to read, to listen, to seek out those who have walked the path before you. I can tell you from experience that one idea, properly tended, can outlast a lifetime of hard work. One book you write can continue to sell long after you've stopped promoting it. One piece of land can generate income while you're doing something else. One investment in a solid company can pay dividends for decades. What separates those who build this kind of life from those who don't is a simple shift in belief. You must stop seeing yourself as a worker for money and start seeing yourself as a director of money. You must accept that money is a tool, a resource, a force that can operate independent of your effort once you've put it to work. Imagine planting a garden that grows every year, regardless of the weather, regardless of whether you tend it every morning. Imagine writing a book that finds readers long after the ink is dry. Imagine making an investment that quietly appreciates, rewarding you for a choice you made long ago. All of this is possible when you respect the dollar, educate the mind, and understand that true wealth is built when your money works longer hours than you ever can. The richest people aren't those who stay awake longer. They are the ones who have taught their money to stay awake for them. And that is how you move from surviving to thriving, from working for a dollar to making a dollar work for you. I remember a conversation with an old carpenter when I was just starting out, a man who worked with wood as if it spoke to him. I watched him for hours one afternoon as he sanded a piece of oak. He didn't rush. He didn't glance at the clock. He gave every stroke of sandpaper his full attention. I asked him why he worked with such precision, and he smiled and said, "I'm not working for this piece of wood. I'm working for the moment when someone needs a table and only the best will do. I'm making sure that when the moment arrives, I am ready." Those words have lived with me for the rest of my life because they carry a lesson far beyond carpentry. They carry the lesson of preparation. Most people pray for an opportunity, but few live like it's already on its way. They wait for the moment before trying to build the skills, the connections, the habits that opportunity demands. And when the moment arrives, and it always does, it finds them wishing, hoping, and suddenly trying to piece themselves together in a rush. The wealthy, the successful, the truly fulfilled understand that every day is a chance to prepare for a door that hasn't yet appeared. They practice, save, learn, and build as if that door is guaranteed to open tomorrow morning. I learned this lesson in my own life when I was younger. I was trying to build a business, chasing opportunities that felt too big for me. They came, and I missed some because I was hoping for them, not ready for them. So I changed. I stopped chasing the moments and started building the person those moments would recognize. I saved a little every paycheck, not because I had too much, but because I wanted to have enough when the right chance came. I read every night, even when I was tired, because I wanted a mind sharp enough to recognize an opportunity the moment it appeared. I introduced myself to people I admired, learned from mentors, offered help when I had no reason to expect anything in return. Those moments weren't transactions. They were planting seeds, nurturing connections, making sure that when life called my name, I would be ready to stand. You have to live like the chance you've been hoping for is already making its way towards you. The mistake many make is thinking that opportunity arrives announced with bells and trumpets, a letter in the mail, a phone call with an offer. It doesn't. It arrives quietly, like a shift in the wind. Sometimes it arrives as a conversation with a stranger. Sometimes as a book that changes the way you think. Sometimes as a moment when a door cracks open and only those with the discipline, the resources, the relationships, and the courage can walk through. Preparation isn't a one-time event. It's a daily ritual. It's making a small investment every morning in yourself, in your craft, in your relationships, in your future. It's setting a little money aside when it's tempting to spend. It's nurturing a conversation when it's tempting to walk away. It's doing the work when no one is looking and no one is applauding. The tragedy for many is that life will open its hand to them, and their hands will be too full of excuses or too empty of readiness to accept it. I've watched this happen in countless lives. An opportunity arrives, a new role, a partnership, an investment, a chance to step onto a bigger stage, and the person freezes. Not because the opportunity was too big, but because they had ignored the countless moments when life whispered, "Get ready." The lesson is simple, and it is as old as mankind itself. Life doesn't reward intention. Life rewards preparation. So ask yourself tonight, if the moment came tomorrow, if the person I've hoped to meet walked in, if the chance I've prayed for arrived, would I be ready? If the answer is no, then you have work to do, and this is your gift, this is your warning and your invitation. Build as if the moment is already on its way. Save as if the future is already knocking. Learn as if the test is tomorrow morning. Connect as if the person you need to meet is already standing in the room. Do this, and when the door finally swings open, you won't stumble. You will walk through it tall and sure, knowing that this moment didn't just happen to you, it was built by you. I remember an afternoon long ago when I was sitting with an old man who had built a quiet, remarkable life. He was nearing the end of his days, but you could sense an energy about him, a strength that came from knowing he had built more than an account. He had built a legacy. As we talked, he said something I will never forget. "It doesn't matter how much money you have when you die," he said. "It matters what you taught while you lived." Those words sank deep, and every year I've walked this path, I've come to understand them more clearly. The world doesn't remember numbers. The world remembers character. It remembers habits. It remembers ideas passed down like a flame from one hand to another. So many people spend their days chasing a number. They count, save, invest, and work themselves to exhaustion, hoping that one day, when the total is high enough, they can rest. But what then? What is the point of a dollar that doesn't teach? What is the point of an investment that doesn't outlive you in its impact? The wealthy understand a secret that goes far beyond the balance sheet. True richness is measured by the strength of the values you embed in the next generation. True wealth is when your discipline becomes someone else's roadmap. True success is when your ideas, your philosophy about life and money continue working long after you've stopped working. That's why it's worth doing the quiet work of writing down what you believe. Not for vanity, not for ego, but for clarity. What do you stand for? What are your rules for money, for discipline, for dealing with adversity? What lessons shaped you? What truths about life and effort would you want your children or your students, colleagues, friends to inherit? The wealthy understand that ideas can compound just as money can. An idea taught to one person can shift a family for generations. An example lived openly can break a cycle of poverty or build a tradition of prosperity. An old notebook of thoughts can become a roadmap for someone seeking direction when you're long gone. I learned this when I was younger. An older businessman pulled out a tattered leather notebook and placed it in my hands. Inside were thoughts about money, about discipline, about setbacks he had faced and conquered. I read page after page, and I felt like I was listening to the voice of a man who refused to accept a mediocre life. Those pages weren't worth $1, but to me and to countless others he gave them to, they were worth a fortune. They shaped how I worked, how I treated people, how I treated money. They shaped a piece of my legacy before I had one to claim. That's the secret. Wealth is not what you leave behind in a bank account. Wealth is what you leave behind in the heart and mind of another person. It is the habits you pass down, the discipline you model every morning, the conversations you have when no one else is listening. True legacy is built in moments that seem insignificant at the time. The quiet conversation with a child about why you save, the patient lesson with a younger colleague about why you give before you take, the quiet example of getting up early, doing the hard work, living within your means, and making time for reflection and gratitude. These moments cost you nothing, but when they land in a receptive heart, their returns can be measured for generations. I've watched wealthy families rise and fall within a generation because the only thing passed down was money, not wisdom. And I've watched modest families rise within a generation because the inheritance was character, discipline, integrity. You can multiply dollars endlessly, but you can only multiply character by planting it intentionally in another person's life. So tonight, ask yourself, what am I teaching? What am I sharing? What am I living? Whatever it is, write it down, speak it aloud, share it openly. Let it stand as a beacon for those who come after you. Wealth is not a number. Wealth is a philosophy that lives longer than any bank statement. Build that and your riches will outlive your income. And so here we stand at the end of a conversation that is really a beginning, because this is the point where ideas must become decisions and decisions must become habits. All the words we've exchanged tonight don't matter if they don't move you to action. The greatest tragedy in life isn't that we didn't learn the right lessons. It's that we learned and refused to apply them. Look around your life for a moment. Think about the money that has passed through your hands, the moments when you felt inspired, and ask yourself, quote, what am I doing with this one chance? Quote, what am I planting for the seasons to come? You don't have to have millions to think like a wealthy person. You just have to have a vision and the discipline to act on it. You don't have to wait for a raise or an inheritance. You can make a decision tonight with whatever you have to save a piece, to invest a piece, to build a piece. You can make a decision tonight to open a book, to listen to a mentor, to have a conversation that reshapes the direction of your future. If there's one thing I can leave with you, it's this. What you do with today is what you'll reap tomorrow. What you do when no one is looking is what you'll carry with you when the spotlight shines. What you practice in silence is what will speak the loudest when your chance arrives. Never forget, the wealthy aren't wealthy because of the numbers in their bank account, but because of the habits in their character. What separates those who win from those who wish is the ability to act when the feeling is fresh, when the lesson is sharp, when the idea is burning in their chest. So, as you walk away from this moment, don't walk away from yourself. Take one step tonight. Open one account, read one page, save $1, make one call, plant one seed. You don't have to have it all figured out, and you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be committed. The path to wealth and freedom is built one decision, $1, one discipline at a time. Begin now, and a year from today, you'll stand where others only dreamed. The best time to plant your future was long ago, but the second best time is right now. So go and plant it. Let this be the moment that changes everything.